Well, David Harris, thanks for speaking with Central Coast Newspapers. Congratulations from your team. It's still unsure on the seat of Terrigal. We're here at Erina. How do you think that'll play out?
Yeah, look, it's really close. I think we won't know the result probably until sometime tomorrow when they've counted the rest of the pre-poll results and the postal votes. But the fact that we've got so close in a seat that was held by the government by over 12% shows that people on the Central Coast were ready to change. The blue blood Liberal areas are prepared to look at Labor, and we saw that with Dr Gordon Reid. And it shows that our policies are resonating out there in the community where we're putting people first and making sure that particularly our frontline workers are front and centre of our attention.
Yeah, now I'll get onto that. The frontline workers, we've covered over the years the dissatisfaction or the difficulties inside the hospitals in particular. The nurses seem to be at an end of their tether. Do you think that had something to do with the results?
It absolutely did. So I think my analysis of where the government went wrong was instead of sitting down with those frontline workers, listening to their concerns and trying to address them, they kept saying everything's good. And the government's total focus was on infrastructure. The infrastructure is important, of course it is, but unless you've got the people inside the buildings delivering the services, then they're not effective. So having nice big hospitals isn't enough. You have to staff them. And I've had incidents even in the last 24 hours where people have gone to the hospital in an emergency situation, and once they've got into the hospital, they've been treated fantastically, but that nexus from the car park through emergency is a real concern, and that's why those safe staffing levels are so important. It's also why paying proper wages is so important, because we're losing great practitioners to other states because we're no longer competitive.
Yeah, it's a big thing. We'll come back to that. Now, the council, do you think the council, I mean the sitting, only ex-government sitting member, was really flogged here. Do you think the council, let's just say, decision, or the council chaos had anything to do with the result?
Oh, absolutely. And what people raised with me was the fact they were never consulted. So although they said there was a vote from both the councils to merge, the actual people, the ratepayers, weren't consulted. And we know that in the past there's been a great north-south rivalry, and in Gosford and Wyong and all those sorts of things. But the reality is, people have seen their services cut, they've seen their rates go up, and many people who work for council, which was one of the biggest employers in the area, were made redundant. And so that has to have an effect. And we've always said that we thought merging the councils was the wrong thing to do. You can get efficiencies, you can get more cooperation. That could have been done without merging and allow people to still have their local voice. We saw the council merge, we saw the financial disaster because they weren't supported properly. And you can blame staff or you can blame the councillors, but the fact is the foundations were never good, and we've always prosecuted that case. So we're not surprised that it ended up the disaster it would, and people still want their say in terms of whether to separate the councils.
So you're committed to asking the people at a particular point in time, and when would that be?
Yeah, so our policy's always been no forced mergers and no forced demergers. So what will happen is, when the new council is elected in 2024, those councillors will have a decision about going to the people and asking them what they need to do. And what I would say to the community is, don't vote for someone who doesn't make that commitment. They need to be out there and say, we want to give you a voice, and let the community decide whether they want to keep Central Coast Council as one or they want to have the two separate councils. But whatever they do, they need to make sure that we keep efficiencies in back office, in waste, in water and those things, because they're huge enterprises that have to be run properly and not split into two different entities, because we lose efficiencies and then people do pay more.
Now, would you like to acknowledge some of the work that has been done by the previous government? There's a lot's happened up here, particularly some of the road commitments, or the major road commitments. The small roads not so much. Would you like to acknowledge the work that the government had done, the previous government?
Yeah, I said on the election night when I was asked, I said, Adam Crouch has done a wonderful job as the Lone Ranger for the government in a area dominated by Labor MPs. I've worked behind the scenes very well with Adam. We have our disagreements, as you would expect, but on important issues we've had unity, and that's about getting the most for the Central Coast. And so the government has delivered, particularly our 2 hospital upgrades. They've continued the work we started in terms of the Pacific Highway upgrade and Central Coast Highway upgrade. They're things that have to happen no matter who's in power. And we've made the commitment to continue those, so the projects the government has nominated, we will push forward with, because the Central Coast people need a good transport system, and they only get that if the roads have the capacity to carry people around, particularly our buses. So we'll make some changes. We want to make sure there's bus priority lanes and there's priority signalling, so public transport's more efficient. But the overall structure will stay the same because it's the right thing to do.
Now, you've committed previously to have a minister for the Central Coast, and will that be you? And do you think it will make a difference?
Yeah, so obviously our leader, Chris Minns, will make that decision. He's indicated now twice in interviews that he's happy with the work of the shadow cabinet, and he doesn't see that he'll need to change too much, so I'm hoping that's a good signal. But we will have a minister for the Central Coast sitting at the cabinet table, working with other ministers to make sure our issues are front and centre. And I'm hoping that I'll have that responsibility. I've been there before working. We previously had a minister for the Central Coast, and I was parliamentary secretary, so we had both. And we got a lot of our road funding, a whole lot of things started because we had that voice at the table, particularly when we had Nathan Rees, who was the Premier. We got some good funding. So I think it's absolutely essential. We're one of the biggest regions in Australia. We're one of the most important regions economically, particularly in terms of our workforce. And, you know, people here should be rewarded for sticking with Labor members, even through opposition, in the longer term, because they had confidence in us that we could help deliver. And we'll be making sure, and Yasmin, who will, I hope, be the Minister for the Hunter, will certainly be combining our forces to make sure we get the resources that we should have.
Now, you've made some commitments, specific commitments during the election campaign, footpaths and extra road funding. When will those things likely, when will we likely see that happen?
Yeah, so obviously there'll be the first budget, which I'm assuming will be July, August. It'll probably be a little bit delayed because of the election and its normal period, but we should see the funding start to flow then, because we made our commitment over the 4 years. There'll be some money each year over the 4 years. We know how important roads are on the Central Coast. It's the biggest issue people raise with you. And the second biggest issue is footpaths, because we have so many elderly people who need to move around. We have kids who need to get to school. We have people who like cycling, etc. So we've got to have that infrastructure. They're as important as the roads, particularly on the Central Coast, where we want people to be able to get to services quickly and maybe leave their car at home, because that helps congestion.
Now, is there anything else you want to say to our readers, viewers?
Yeah, look, I'd like to thank the people of the Central Coast. They've kept their confidence in our local Labor team, and we've been returned this time with record numbers. This is the highest margin ever in the seat of Wyong, for example. So we have to repay that confidence, and we have to make sure we deliver. And we met yesterday, and we had the discussion about we have no honeymoon period. We can't bask in any glory, anything like that. It's down to business. We have to, from day one, as soon as Chris makes his appointments, start working on delivering for the people of the Central Coast, because they can quite easily withdraw their votes as easy as they give them, and we understand that. So if we don't perform, then we would expect there would be a backlash, and it's all in our hands to deliver the services, the infrastructure to the people of the Central Coast that they deserve.
All right, thanks for speaking with us.
All right, thank you.